Yo, what's up everybody? My name is Fidelity and welcome to a matchup discussion video. Now previously I discussed a little bit about Balrog. I want to do the same thing for Luke, as he's one of the most popular characters I've played in this game. Both online and offline, Luke is just everywhere. So I might as well talk about the things that I look for in this matchup and hopefully spread the information that I know so that other people have tangible stuff that they can look for and have better defensive strategies and all that jazz. So yeah, let's get started. So Luke can be a very overwhelming character, to say the least. Like, he just has an abundance of really good tools that he can use at all times. In particular, the first option I wanted to talk about was his fireball. Now, when using Ed, most of the time, like if you're gonna play a very reactive game plan against Luke, I wouldn't recommend trying to go for the V skill 2 and react to his fireball, because most of the time, because of the fireball's quickness, you just end up getting hit most of the time. Like, I'm not gonna say to never use the V skill 2, because when you have a good read on Luke, well, you have a good read, and if it works, you get a pretty decent knockdown into Oki. However, because of the quickness of that fireball, you're gonna end up getting hit most of the time. So I would recommend not having like a mainly reactive tool or mainly reactive game plan to his fireball, and just letting him do it, you know? And even if you do let him do the fireball, it's not the end of the world, because if he hits you on block, it practically does no damage, like it doesn't do much. And even if it hits you, it does like a very small amount of damage. Like, you can take a billion of these fireballs and still be fine and in a winnable position. So most of the time, I'd say it's more practical to just let the Luke player do it. And if you have the occasional read, yeah, use the B skill too, but don't have it as like the main crux or the main like meat of your game plan. You have better stuff that you can look for. Personally, I think the best thing that you can look for would be Luke's stand medium punch and Luke's forward heavy punch, because they have a pretty hefty amount of recovery to the move. Mainly because since they move Luke forward and they kind of like, you know, just chucks at you, they gave the move a bunch of recovery, or at least enough that you can reliably see it, meaning that they're very whiff punishable. So whenever you see Luke just use these normals, which is basically an eventuality against his character, just whiff punish him. And lucky for Ed, even though his whiff punishment isn't the best, he can always reliably crouch mini kick into upper or crouch mini kick into the up kicks and get pretty good damage with Oki. So a very important thing to note is that Luke players are kind of going to use a variation between these three things. They're going to first start out with throwing the fireball, because, you know, they have really good fireball. They're always going to want to throw it, like real players. And then once they get tired of constantly throwing the fireball, they're going to start using mainly these two normals. A lot of players like to use the forward heavy punch because it's big damage. So once you like scout that out, it's a very easy whip punish. Other players are gonna feel a little bit more secure, or if they're cornered, they're gonna want to use stand medium punch because it's a little faster. But either way, just keep in mind of these two options, and you should reliably whip punish Luke and get a pretty good defensive game plan going here. Because, you know, just let him throw the fireball, and then once you see one of these two normals, just whip punish it, and bang, you're winning. That's it. Once you start playing higher level Luke players, the matchup will get considerably more difficult, because they'll start implementing a more footsie based, more patient game plan. And it becomes very annoying, actually, because it's going to be in addition to the fireball and stand medium punch bullshit that Luke players already do. In specific, they're going to start walking around a bit more, they're going to start being a little bit more patient, and they're going to start poking away at you with stand mini kick and crouch mini kick. This isn't all bad though. Ed does have pretty good options to deal against this. In specific, he can use his crouch medium punch, which is really good as a defensive poke. Like, once you think the Luke player is going to start to walk inside of the range of your crouch medium punch, you can just throw it, and most of the time you'll hit him. If not, you can also use stand mini kick, as it has a little bit more range. However, I suggest to use it seldomly, because you'll fall into range of Luke's, you know, one of his main pokes with his crouch mini kick. It will be very probable that he'll duck under your stand mini kick and whiff punish you with crouch mini kick. However, you shouldn't be discouraged from using this normal, because if you kind of present it, you kind of give false hope to the Luke player, because he knows that he can duck under it, you know. So most Luke players will try and enforce their will and be overzealous with their button picks, meaning that you can start implementing your stand fierce and get a pretty chunky damage and a knockdown with a stand fierce. So whenever you see them trying to walk inside the range and trying to smother you with buttons, you can just like make them shut up and knock them with the stand fierce and get a pretty decent crush counter into Oki mid screen. And it can be pretty good actually for Ed, because you discourage them if you play it right, and you know it can be very discouraging for Luke, because you'll kind of force them into thinking that they need to use the fireball or that they need to use forward fierce or stand medium punch, which would then, you know, complement the initial game plan that you already have into whip punishment and all that stuff. I also want to talk about Flicker's role in this matchup, and I'm very happy to say that it is godlike. It is very good in this matchup, unfortunate for Luke. Once you get the Luke player to start to play in the stand media kick and crouch media kick range, Luke, or better said Ed, can control the pace of the match and with the flicker, and it can make it very annoying for Luke and very discouraging for him to throw most normals out, especially because if he starts to panic and start throwing moves like stand medium punch and forward fierce, Ed can very reliably stuff the startup of those moves with his jab into flicker, which makes it very good for Ed. However, whenever you do use the flicker, you have to keep in mind that Luke has one of the best whiff punishes for the flicker. He can, if he just randomly does backdash and he catches your flicker whiff, he can very easily just go for stand fierce and get a shitload of damage with his charge combos, and he can just destroy you that way. So even though the flicker can be a very, very good tool in the neutral, you have to be very careful about throwing it. However, this is like very top echelon of Luke players. You generally don't have to worry about it. But once you start playing like your big birds, your mana RDs, be careful of when you want to throw flicker, because once you throw it, just be ready to lose basically half your life bar. You know, you have to be ready for that. So be sure that you can dominate the neutral defensively with stand media kick and stand fierce, which will make all of your flicker tosses just that much more annoying and obnoxious, because that's when they won't even be thinking about it that much at that point, because you can already be winning without the flicker. So once you add it, it'll be just that much more scary. Lastly, I want to talk about the V-triggers. You can kind of pick whichever V-trigger you want. All of them work. V-trigger 1, Luke doesn't really have much against the activation. You can always EXDV through it, but it's not that big a deal because you can just create space against them. And V-trigger 2, like, it's just like any other character. You can use V-trigger 2 pretty reliably. The only key interaction to worry about here is that when Luke uses his own V-trigger 1, keep in mind that you could always V-reversal on reaction and get pretty big damage and punish him for using the V-trigger 1 in neutral. But other than that, it's just pretty standard stuff. Like, you can pick whichever V-trigger you want and just go ham. That concludes everything I wanted to discuss when it comes to Ed versus Luke. Hopefully y'all learned something. And yeah, I kind of like these type of videos now. I might make more. Might talk about the common characters, or the more common characters you run into online, and the strategies that like you can use to beat them. So yep, thank you guys for watching, and take care of yourselves. Peace.